The most merciful thing in the world, I think, is the inability of the human mind to correlate all its contents. We live on a placid island of ignorance in the midst of black seas of infinity, and it was not meant that we should voyage far. Today we're going to take a look at cosmic horror, and while not the most powerful of the great old ones, who lived ages before there were any men, but one of HP Lovecraft's most popular characters of his body of work, Cthulhu. Hi, I'm Rob, and this is A Constantly Racing Mind. Today I'm not going to talk so much about Lovecraft himself. Perhaps that is a whole other video. In the meantime, you can check out a previous video I did that touches on him and the Necronomicon. Link in the description. Since the emergence in the 1920s, Cthulhu has grown in popularity as other authors, friends of Lovecraft, took on the task both during his lifetime and posthumously of expanding the Cthulhu mythos. So if you're new here, we cover film genres of sci-fi, horror, action, adventure, prop culture, and all things geek. So if you want more videos on this subject, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification button to be aware of all my uploads. We meet this ancient terrible god when Lovecraft first wrote about him in the summer of 1926. However, it was 2 years later in February 1928 that the Weird Tales published it. As usual, when asked about his inspiration for the story and the enormous creature Cthulhu, and as he did with many stories, he claimed that it came to him in a dream he had in 1919. Now, Lovecraft tells us that in his dream he visited a museum of antiquities in the hometown of Providence, Rhode Island. Now, Lovecraft attempted to convince the old curator there to buy an odd bas-relief or bas-relief, which means low relief, more like what you see on the top of a coin. Lovecraft himself had sculpted it. The curator, who initially scoffs at him for trying to sell something recently made to a museum of antique objects, Lovecraft then remembers himself answering the curator with this response. "Why do you say that this thing is new? The dreams of men are older than brooding Egypt, or the contemplative Sphinx, or garden-girdled Babylon, and this was fashioned in my dreams." Now, this line finds its way into his story, The Call of Cthulhu. Lovecraft tells the story of the slumbering Cthulhu in three parts: the whoring clay, the tale of Inspector Legras, and the madness from the sea. Now, the whoring clay introduces us to our narrator. We know about our narrator that he is the grandnephew of Professor Emeritus of Semitic Languages at Brown University, which is in Providence, Rhode Island. His uncle's name is wgah'nagl, and of course he is an authority on ancient inscriptions. His uncle recently died when he was returning from the port. He fell after he was bumped by a sailor, whom, of course, Lovecraft uses derogatory terms, therefore causing the reader to be suspicious of the sailor. As the only living relative of Professor Angel, he must go through his uncle's things. He says that most of the research papers will be published by the American Archaeological Society. The society, which is, in fact, like Miskatonic University in the fictitious town of Arkham, it too is imaginary. Lovecraft was great at giving life to his New England region by mixing fact, fiction, and history, and other contemporary stories by authors who were his friends. Now, the nephew comes across the locked box, which he eventually finds the key and opens it to see the bas-relief of that hideous creature. Going through his uncle's notes, he pieces together what is in essence a quote-unquote found footage narrative, only in print. This is how stories were told in retrospect, such as Dracula, for example. Our narrator not only sees the box with a clay sculpture, but as well a manuscript. And for us here in the 21st century, a manuscript is just a handwritten document. Now back to the bas-relief. Our narrator describes it like this: "If I say that my somewhat extravagant imagination yields simultaneous pictures of an octopus, a dragon, and a human caricature, I shall not be unfaithful to the spirit of the thing, a pulpy, tentacled head surmounted a grotesque and scaly body with rudimentary wings, but it was the general outline of the whole which made it most shockingly frightful. Behind the figure was a vague suggestion of a cyclopean architectural background." Now, the manuscript is broken out into two parts. This gives our narrator the clues he needs to piece together this horrible secret of the cult of Cthulhu. The two parts are 1925, Dream and Dream Work of H.A. Wilcox, and 1908, Narrative of Inspector John R. Legras. A year prior, on March 1st, 1925, on the night before, there was a slight earthquake. We are told of a young man by the name of Henry Anthony Wilcox, a sculptor from a good family, but he is considered a strange and gaunt-looking fellow. Like Lovecraft's dream on the March 1st, the young man brings the bas-relief to the professor. The professor reacts as one would suspect, with suspicion. But after a moment, the professor realizes that he has seen this monstrous creature before. While the professor initially believed that Wilcox was part of a secret society or a member of a cult, he realizes that the kid had no idea what he had sculpted or why it called to him from that great cyclopean city he dreamt of that scared the crap out of him. So the professor starts investigating. He hires a clipping service, a company that employs people around the country to look through newspapers for articles which the professor hired the service to find. So the papers were all brief notes, some of the accounts of the strange dreams of different people, some of the citations from the theosophical books and magazines such as W. Scott Eliot's Atlantis and the Lost Lemuria. The rest are about long surviving secret societies and hidden cults, with references to passages in such mythological and anthropological sources such as Fraser's Golden Bough and Miss Murray's witch cult in Western Europe. The cuttings largely alluded to unusual mental illnesses and outbreaks of group hysteria or mania in the spring of 1925. Now, also in the document are notes of various acquaintances of the professor who, upon the request, recorded their dreams. Average people in the society and business didn't really have much to report. However, it was the artists and the poets that had the strangest dreams. And the story says that if they all got together and compared their notes, they would have certainly gone insane. So from February 28th to April 2nd, a large proportion of them had dreamed very bizarre things, the intensity of the dream being immeasurably strong during the period when our sculpture actually goes kind of crazy. It is even mentioned that a year later, the famed painter Ardois Bruneau hung the blasphemous dreams landscape in the Paris Spring Salon. However, on March 22nd, Wilcox came down with a raging fever that lasted until April 2nd when the fever broke. All that time he raved about the crap and the nightmares. Also, the other clippings in the dreams note that the professor collected started getting even more strange. After April 2nd, it all kind of ended. Now, in the second part, the tale of Inspector Legrasse, the narrator tells of the professor traveling to St. Louis to a conference of the American Archaeological Society. While there in 1907, a New Orleans police inspector shows up with a strange stone idol. He acquired the image during a raid in the bayou where some weird cult was having strange and dark, perhaps voodoo rites. The statue is, of course, of Cthulhu. It was 7 or 8 inches in height, with an octopus-like head whose face was a mass of feelers, a scaly, rubbery-looking body, prodigious claws on the hind and fore feet, and long, narrow wings behind. The thing, which seemed instinct with a feasible and unnatural malignancy, was of somewhat bloated corpulence and squatted evilly on a rectangular block of pedestal covered with undecipherable characters. The tips of the wings touched the back edge of the block. The seat occupied the center, while the long, curved claws of the doubled-up, crouching hind legs gripped the front side and extended a quarter of the way down toward the bottom of the pedestal. The cephalopod head was bent forward so that the ends of the feelers brushed upon the backs of the huge forepaws that clasped the croucher's elevated knees. Now, of course, the inspector wanted some information about it, and it turns out that an elder professor by the name of Webb, who 50 years prior traveled to Greenland and heard from local Eskimos that there was a strange, degenerate tribe that worshipped an unknown devil. Now, this demon was older than man. It was bloodthirsty and repulsive. It is there in Greenland that Webb first saw the bas-relief of the creature that the inspector now holds a 3D representation of. Now, both the cold of the north and the steam of the swamp, this creature is worshipped. Legrasse then tells of the cultists that he had captured in the raid and what they chanted. mglw'nafh, Cthulhu, wgah'nagl fetagen, which Legrasse says that it means, in the house of Relia, dead Cthulhu waits, dreaming. They worship, so the cultists said, the great old ones who lived ages before there were any men, and who came to the young world out of the sky. Those old ones were gone now, inside the earth and under the sea, but their dead bodies had told their secrets and dreams to the first men who formed a cult which had never died. The captured worshipper said it had always existed and always would exist, hidden in distant wastes and dark places all over the world, until the time when the great priest Cthulhu from the dark house in the mighty city Aurelia under the waters should rise and bring earth again beneath its sway. Someday he would call when the stars were ready, and the secret cult would always be waiting to liberate him. There is much to tell, but I have little time to tell here. But it is said of the mad Arab Abdul al-Hazarad, which the initiated might read as they choose, especially the much discussed couplet. That is not dead which can eternal lie, and with strange aeons even death may die. Angela's nephew, our narrator, tracks down Wilcox, and like his uncle is convinced of his sincerity, that he knew nothing of the secret dark cults of what the creature was that he sculpted. He told of the great city Aurelia and the giant creature that sleeps below. Our narrator begins to believe that he, like his uncle, will die a suspicious death. Now, the madness from the sea, the third part of our story, describes the recovery of the freighter Vigilant and in tow the armed vessel Alert, with one living and one dead man aboard. Now, the story is really about the men of the two-masted schooner Emma out of Auckland, New Zealand. The Emma was delayed and thrown widely south of her course by the great storm of March 1st. But on the second day, they were confronted by the armed South Sea Islanders. They wanted the Emma to turn back, but the Emma's captain refused. They were fired upon, and as the Emma was about to go down, they were able to pull alongside the Alert, board the ship, and kill the crew. The captain and the second mate were dead, leaving it up to second mate Gustav Johansen, a Norwegian. Now the crew continued on until it came to a small island protruding out of the ocean. But it isn't till much later that we learn what happened on that island. I can assure you, you will go mad, as did Gustav Johansen. Obviously, I did not do the story justice. I wanted to give you a taste of cosmic horror, that there is no recognizable divine presence, such as a god, in this or any universe, and that humans are particularly insignificant in the larger scheme of intergalactic existence. The most prominent theme in humanity's fear of their insignificance in the face of incomprehensibly vast universe is a fear of the cosmic void. Make sure you share your comments about the content of this video. Let me know what you think of my little buddy here, and thank you for watching. If you liked the video, hit the like or the thumbs up. If you didn't, slam the thumbs down. Subscribe if you did, and ring the bell to get notified when my videos come out. Take care.